Number 10. All-female X-Men. Oddly enough, this book didn't do as hot as expected, despite the fact that it was an awesome powerhouse team composed of all ladies. This team was first introduced in 2013's X-Men series in issue number 1, as one of the main X-Men teams, and the series was part of the Marvel Now event. The team featured Kitty Pryde, Rogue, Rachel Summers, Jubilee, and Psylocke, with Storm as the leader. This team was the first in the history of the X-Men to be an all-female team with its own book. So while it was not a commercial success, it's still an important part of X-Men history to be noted for sure. Number 9. Chuck Austen's Uncanny X-Men. At least, I kind of hope you've never heard of this one, because if you have, you probably just forgot about it after years of trying, and now I'm traumatizing you by bringing it back up. This is the team that featured Stacy X. Yeah. I like Stacy X, but I can also see why her character and this run were super problematic. Austen's run on Uncanny X-Men began in issue 410 and ran till issue 443. The problem here wasn't so much to do with the members of the team as the subject matter. Many people feel that Austen's run was hypersexual, and he also gave us the revelation that Nightcrawler's dad was Azazel, which honestly isn't that terrible, but then he also gave us the weird Draco storyline with the X-Men versus the Neopham, which was something. It was a time. All in, this was definitely a controversial run, especially considering the relationship between Husk and Angel. The team was made up of Archangel, Beast, Iceman, Nightcrawler, Stacy X, Wolverine, and Professor X himself to start, but it would later on feature Husk, Polaris, Northstar, Juggernaut, and Havoc. Before we move on to this next spot, just a quick little reminder to click that like button if you haven't already, it really does help us out. Number 8. Children of the Atom. You might not have heard of this one because it isn't even out yet, but this is one of the new teams and books that we had expected to see earlier this year, but due to the global pandemic was delayed and is now delayed again. Originally it was moved to January of 2021, but now we aren't expected to see it till April of 2021. Boy, that is a long wait. But just because they aren't around yet doesn't mean we can't talk about them. And if you haven't heard of this team yet, you might want to keep your eye out for when their book is released. Children of the Atom is a team of new teen mutants who are basically X-Men superfans and are trained by these very famous original mutants. Technically, the X-Men team was never meant to exist in Krakoa, as was just revealed recently in the comics, despite them having their own book as part of the Dawn of X line. I know, it's a little confusing. So it'll be interesting to see how the Children of the Atom, who are being advertised as kind of X-Men sidekicks, fit in exactly. In a world where, there's not really supposed to be X-Men? Well, we have yet to meet the members of this team. We do know some of them not only have similar costumes to the classic X-Men, but also have similar powers. Number 7. Hellions. No, not that Hellions. This Hellions. In fact, Empath's look in the new Hellions was a throwback to the original Hellions team outfits. Empath was also an original member of the team. Before we saw the team revived in Dawn of X, they were Emma Frost's team. Basically her version of a teenage mutant team similar to, well, the New Mutants. We're also a teenage mutant team. Every time I say teenage mutant team, I just want to say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but that's not what we're talking about. Although they are also a teenage mutant team. In comparison to the new Hellions, these Hellions were not as crazy, but were somewhat troublemakers, who had an ongoing, sometimes friendly rivalry with the New Mutants themselves. The team consisted of Empath, Beef, Bevatron, Cat's Eye, Roulette, Taro, Thunderbird, Jetstream, and Firestart. The team was first introduced in New Mutants issue number 16 in the 1980s and was disbanded in 2009 in the comics after most of them were basically slaughtered, victims of a surprise attack. The team has returned since, but the new Hellions team only shares one member of the original roster, Empath. Number 6. X Corporation. Many people may have forgotten the existence of X Corporation since the organization was destroyed and became defunct back in the early 2000s, but they are coming back, so it's a pretty good time to remind everyone of their existence. Reminder, X Corp is still a thing. This actually just happened in the comics during the Empire event when we saw for certain that Xavier had revived the X Corp and that Monet and Angel seem to be running this branch of mutant affairs. X Corp in the past has been a non non-for-profit organization working to help mutants in their fight for rights, in less bold ways than what the X-Men are usually up to. It also provided a place of refuge for mutants who needed it, until the global organization had their various branches targeted and blown up around the globe following the events of M-Day. X-Corp will be getting their own book in the Dawn of X line, which I am way too excited about. I just want to see Angel get a moment in the spotlight, you know? Many believe the book to have been cancelled, but Jonathan Hickman actually confirmed early in December that it is still very much a go. Number 5. X-Men The End. In this series, we saw a bunch of teams kind of come together, ending in one big one, and Chris Claremont's The End. I like this X-Men team as well because although she died pretty early on in terms of her appearance here, we also get a shout out at least to Dust. And Dust is such an underrated X-Men in my opinion. This comic also introduces us to the future daughter of Bishop and Deathbird, Aaliyah Bishop. The final X-Men team features Kitty Pryde, Wolfsbane, Karma, North Star, Dust, Martha Johansson aka No Girl, the Cuckoos, Cyclops, and a subgroup known as the Heavy Hitters, which features Wither, Frenzy, Polaris, Juggernaut, and Kid Colossus. Number 4. The Upstarts. Speaking of young mutant teams that are lesser known like the Hellions, we also have their straight up not friendly at all rivals, the Upstarts. The Upstarts were definitely a more villainous crew in comparison to the Hellions, just in general, as their whole goal was to basically kill mutants. The Upstarts were a mutant team created by Selene, the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club. She put the team together in order to test the members, getting them to compete for points which would be awarded whenever they killed mutants, based on the mutants' power set. Originally, the young group of mutants involved were unnamed and were promised that whoever got the most points would win a prize, which remained a mystery pretty much through all of the comics that they were featured in. I bet it's cake, and I bet it's a lie. Although I think it was also mentioned at one point somewhere that it was immortality, so in case you were wondering, for realsies. Number 3. Battle of the Atom Future X-Men. While everyone might focus on the Battle of the Atom Future Brotherhood team, as Raze has a tendency to steal the show, plus my girl Zorn Jean, and also featuring Molly Hayes, people tend to forget about the awesomeness that was the Future X-Men team. The real X-Men team. This team featured a much more skilled Iceman, who now was known as Ice Wizard, Wiccan, who had become Sorcerer Supreme, Chimera, who is believed to be Storm's daughter that she had with Black Panther, Shogo, Jubilee's son, known as Sentinel X, Colossus armed with Magic's Soul Sword, Kid Omega as Phoenix, and Jubilee as Wolverine. Number 2. X-TREME Sanctions Executive. The other XSE. This team also spiraled out of the team that we talked about previously on part 1 of this list, Extreme X-Men. XSE here stands for the Extreme Sanctions Executive. Similar to the original XSE that Bishop was a part of in the future, this team is also like a military police force meant to maintain and in some cases enforce peace is kept between mutants and humans. Storm was asked to create the team by the United Nations and eventually would increase its numbers by recruiting the rest of her X-Men, making this team another government-sanctioned mutant team, like X-Factor was, and still one of the first of those types of teams. Team members have included Bishop, Cannonball, Magma, Rachel Summers is on every team, I love it, Psylocke, Rogue, Sage, Wolverine, X-23, and Gambit. Number 1. X-Animals. If you're an intense X-Men fan, you may be familiar with Mojo's X-Babies, but are you familiar with his other attempts at recreating or recasting Marvel's 616 X-Men after they were believed dead? One such team that attempted to step in was the X-Animals. This was a team of, well, animals, who each took on the role of a different mutant member of the X-Men. We've got a skunk standing in for Rogue, a bulldog for Wolverine, a pig for Dazzler, a rabbit as Havoc, a cat for our Storm, which I kinda love, a bird, possibly a hawk as Longshot, an otter as Psylocke, and a gorilla as Colossus. Sadly, this team was not acceptable as a replacement in Mojo's opinion, and he got rid of them. but I'd love to see them return at some point, if that's possible. Number 10. Deadly Genesis. We can talk about different X-Men and mutant teams here, but I'd also like to touch on some of the rosters as well that you may have forgotten about. This one might be due to selective memory loss, or it could just be because you haven't read the story yet. We are talking here about the X-Men Deadly Genesis limited series, which revealed the next team sent into Krakoa after the X-Men team we know went missing. This team wasn't necessarily a bad one at all. In fact, all of these mutants are kinda super powerful, but they were all basically introduced in this short series, which didn't really help to make us care as much about them as we could have. All in all, this story just had a very early 2000s feel to it. Not that that's a bad thing. The Deadly Genesis X-Men team were a group of kids that Moira McTaggart was trying to help out. She didn't even really see them as students, and then Charles recruited them and turned them into X-Men. The team consisted of Sway, Petra, Vulcan, and Darwin, who have all recently reappeared in the Dawn of X line, in case you were wondering where they made their first appearance. Number 9. XAVIERS Security Enforcers. One that we might forget about every now and then is the mutant team that Bishop originally belonged to from the alternate dystopian future that he hails from. I believe this Earth is 1191, but I could be mistaken on that. Didn't even write down my Earth number. Bothers me. This mutant team is known as the XSE, which stands for XAVIERS Security Enforcers. If you know Bishop well and you're a big fan, you likely know this team well, but for those who are new to the character, you might not know about this group of enforcers. The point of the team that Bishop was part of was to preserve the long-dead Professor Charles Xavier's dream, where mutants and humans could exist in harmony, living peacefully together. Bishop has even been known to wield specific future equipment, which he got from XSE, although we haven't seen them in a while. All members of the team wear their mutant tattoo brands like a badge of honor, and the members have included Randall, Malcolm, and Bishop's sister Shard, among others over the years. Before we hop into our number 8 spot, I just want to thank all of you for being here and give you a quick reminder to click that like if you are enjoying this video. It really does help us out. Number 8. Nasty Boys. You might remember the original villainous Marauders team, but do you remember Mr. Sinister's Nasty Boys? Don't worry if you have, because I will never let you forget. Well, both the Marauders and Nasty Boys teams are villainous teams. I couldn't have an obscure mutant team list and not seize the opportunity to remind you all of the Nasty Boys, so here we are. I also just love this name for the team. I personally always read Mr. Sinister with like the most outlandish, flamboyant, yet manipulative pseudo-English accent, so for me it's very fitting that he decided to name his team this. Nasty Boys, so perfect. It fits perfectly with the voice that I have for him in my mind. The Nasty Boys were the team that came after the Marauders. Instead of Gambit being involved in the team, Multiple Man was the generally heroic mutant who got involved. Originally, the team saw Ruckus as leader, with Slab, Gorgeous George, Ramrod, and Hairbag making up the roster. Gorgeous George even resurfaced in Dawn of X more recently. Yay! I might be the only one, but I'm still kinda hoping that the Nasty Boys as well will make a return. Bring them back. Bring them back. Number 7. OUTBACK. When it comes to X-Men rosters as teams, one of the best but shortest running roster is the OUTBACK team. This era for the X-Men team lasted less than 25 issues, but was still so good that people still talk about it today. Now, if you missed this one and you've never heard of it, it's one that you actually probably should read. Not one of my silly points, more one of my serious and beloved forgotten teams on this list. The team started off in issue 229 of Uncanny X-Men, with Storm, Wolverine, Rogue, Colossus, Dazzler, Longshot, Havoc, and Psylocke on it. We'd also see Jubilee introduced during this roster's time together. The OUTBACK team is noted as being one of the best rosters for the X-Men when it comes to having a group who truly feel like outsiders. Also, you get to enjoy the Inferno story in this run, which is bizarre and magical, so you're welcome for that. Number 6. X-Corps. No, I'm not talking about the X Corporation, which has yet to come out, but is still coming our way. Thank goodness. I thought that book was going to be firmly cancelled, but fortunately it has been revived. I'm so ready for X Corporation, let's go. When we talk about X-Corps, we are talking about Banshee's team. He formed this team after Generation X disbanded, and most of the team were composed of that era of mutants. This team was made up of former villains turned heroes and was created to act as a police force basically for the mutant community. Joining Banshee were the Blob, Avalanche, Fever Pitch, Jubilee, Husk, and M, aka Monet. The X-Men team actually did not approve of this team's creation and actually attempted to get Banshee to disband it. In the end, Mystique infiltrated the team and liberated its members, especially the villains, who were being manipulated into behaving heroically by Mastermind under Banshee's orders. Number 5. X-TREME X-Men. This X-Men roster marked the return of Chris Claremont to the X-Men in a full-time capacity. X-TREME X-Men Volume 1 is a series that started in 2001 and ran till 2004. It was a team that featured my girl Rogue as the leader, woohoo, which you know I'm all about. The original X-TREME X-Men roster also featured Beast, Psylocke, Bishop, Storm, Sage, and Thunderbird on the team. Lifeguard, Gambit, and Slipstream were also added to the mix throughout. This team was originally brought together to find Destiny's premonition-filled diaries, but of course along the way was distracted by many other imminent threats. As you do when you're on an X team. Number 4. Generation Hope. This one is from the 2010 series Generation Hope and was under Cyclops' banner ultimately following the events of Regenesis. Though the team itself was led by mutant messiah Hope Summers, and its roster consisted of No Girl, Pixie, Primal, Sebastian Shaw, Transonic, Velocidad, and Zero at that time. Though originally Hope's team started pre-Regenesis as just being 5 mutants including Hope herself, with Velocidad, Oya, Primal, and Transonic on the team. The team was a search and rescue group who were brought together as they were acknowledged as being 4 of the 5 lights on Cerebra. Hope basically triggered the rebirth of the mutant gene, activating these mutants. The 5th light was what they sought and kind of why they came together, heading to Tokyo, Japan. Zero was the mutant they sought, who would eventually join the team, although originally would be antagonist. Number 3. X-People. You probably forgot about this team just because their name is, well, super forgettable, but they are actually from a very memorable alternate universe, the MC2, or also known as Alternate Earth 982. This Earth is the home of the beloved Mayday Parker, aka Spider-Girl, now known as Spider-Woman. But you know what's not so memorable from that universe? Their version of the X-Men. I mean, I get that X-People is meant to be gender neutral, more inclusive, but is that really the best name they could come up with? There has to be something that isn't X-Men that is better than that. I mean, I know there is because we have dozens of other X teams with the letter X in them that are way more catchy than X-People. Because of the Earth it is set in, X-People is a team of originally younger mutants who are now older and taking on the role of leaders, mentors, and teachers. Actually, here Jubilee is the team leader, with her core team roster including Simeon, Angry Eagle, Torque, and Spanner. Number 2. Factor 3. Factor 3? That sounds like some kind of toothpaste. This is another villainous team composed of mutants but led by an alien known as Mutant Master. You might not remember it because it was only around for a few issues and also first appeared way early on in X-Men issue 28 back in 1967. This team popped up a few times and would often force mutants into doing their bidding, often mind-controlling Banshee to attempt to kidnap or help kidnap Professor X. What a wacky time it was. Fortunately, in issue 39, Factor 3 was defeated for good and hasn't bothered the X-Men since. So we haven't seen them for a really long time. Number 1. Lightning Force. This X-Men team comes to us admittedly from an alternate reality, which might be why you've never heard of it before. But once you learn about them, you'll likely wish they had remained forgotten. Lightning Force is an X-Men team that we come across in the Exiles, who themselves belong to Earth 597. They are basically the alternate Excalibur team from their reality, a reality where the Axis won World War II. I think you know where we're going with this. Their roster is almost as surprising as the whole idea for this team. We have Herr Xavier, who helped to create the team through experimenting on them. Yikes. And leading the team we have Hauptmann England, aka Captain Britain, with Magon, aka Gloriana, Shadowcat, and Nightcrawler. Also, if you were wondering, yes, Kitty Pryde is still Jewish in this reality, which yeah, makes her character's history here pretty dark.
Coming in at number 10, we have the bloodthirsty vampire Wolverine. In an alternate universe where vampires have launched an all-out assault on the United States, most of the X-Men are bidden and mind-controlled by the Lord of the Vampires, Dracula. Unfortunately for Dracula, however, Wolverine's healing ability allows him to regain his own mental control despite becoming a vampire, and thus is able to overthrow Dracula and become leader of the vampires. Consumed by a bloodlust that amplifies his already pretty frightening rage, Wolverine and his vampire army are able to wipe out most other superpowered life on the planet, only finally being defeated by the combined forces of Doctor Strange and the Punisher as a vampire hunting combination. Coming in at number 9, we have the evil Iceman hailing from the Age of Apocalypse universe. In a world where Apocalypse has taken over mutant kind and only Magneto and a few X-Men are capable of fighting back, the usually optimistic Bobby Drake was forged into a heartless warrior, giving him much stronger control of his ice powers than other depictions of Iceman, and becoming a living streak of ice that can travel instantaneously through water. This version of Iceman would eventually betray his teammates and ally himself with Dark Beast, and was only eventually able to be defeated by having his head shoved inside of a furnace. Which I guess is one way to kill an ice-based villain, but geez, that's a little bit overkill. Coming in at number 8, we have the brainwashed Wolverine of Earth 14850. At one point in the regular Marvel universe, Wolverine was captured and brainwashed by Hydra in order to assassinate the Avengers, but luckily was able to be deprogrammed before he did any real damage. On this alternate Earth, however, the deprogramming never took place, and Wolverine's killing spree of superpowered heroes was able to last for months. Armed with all of his incredible abilities, absolutely no remorse, and the addition of Hydra-developed teleporting technology that nullified even Wolverine's usual weaknesses, and this was a horrifying enemy that even the Avengers couldn't handle. Coming in at number 7, we have Basilisk, the twisted, mask-wearing variant of Cyclops. On an alternate world where anti-mutant sentiment is somehow even higher than the regular Marvel universe, Scott Summers' backstory is made even more tragic. Killing 7 people, including his own parents when his powers first manifest, Cyclops is locked away in the prison Alcatraz and forced to wear a mask made of ruby quartz to control his laser vision. The evil governor of the prison even goes so far as to mutilate Cyclops and remove his eyelids, making the twisted basilisk mask the only method Scott has to control his deadly abilities. A favor that Cyclops would repay by killing the governor and launching a prison break that would eventually lead him back to this universe's X-Men. Coming in at number 6, we're taking a bit of a break from the comics with the Wolverine symbiote from the video game Spider-Man: Web of Shadows. In this game's story, Wolverine has traveled to New York City to deal with a growing symbiote infestation, and even briefly fights Spider-Man when he believes the wall crawler is actually Venom. Unfortunately for Wolverine, he finds himself overwhelmed by actual symbiotes on top of a church and attacks Spider-Man again as the Wolverine symbiote. With all of his usual healing abilities on top of all the usual symbiote enhancements, this version of Wolverine might just be the scariest he's ever been. Coming in at number 5, we have the Ultimate Universe version of Jamie Madrox, aka Multiple Man. Multiple Man's powers have always been a bit overwhelming, with the ability to seemingly create an unlimited amount of duplicates of himself as long as they're generated one at a time. In the Ultimate Universe, however, this power was pushed beyond its limits when Jamie allied himself with the Brotherhood of Mutants, and created tens of thousands of bomb-wielding versions of himself with no regard for his own life. While the Ultimatum event featured many shocking moments, few are as existentially disturbing as literal thousands of clones strapping explosives to themselves just to wipe out several superhero bases. Coming in at number 4, we have the possessed Professor X from Earth 6141. During the event known as M-Day, when Scarlet Witch wiped out most of mutant kind, the extremely powerful telepath known as the Shadow King was able to escape the loss of his powers by transferring his mind through the multiverse to the alternate world of Earth 6141, where he was able to successfully possess the mind of this world's Charles Xavier before the X-Men were even formed. Combining both of their telepathic might, this version of Xavier turned all of his students into perfect killing machines, and placed them firmly under his psychic control, getting them to kill any superheroes who tried to interfere in the Shadow King's schemes. While eventually defeated by the team known as New Excalibur, this group of Shadow X-Men left their world shaking in terror. Coming in at number 3, we have the vampire variant of Storm, aka Bloodstorm. In an alternate reality where Storm was bitten by Dracula before discovering the X-Men, Storm came to Charles Xavier for help with her condition. Unfortunately, her bloodlust was too strong and she wound up feasting on both the Professor and Beast. Horrified at what she'd done, this version of Storm would eventually try and redeem herself after she found herself as part of an invasion force attacking the main Marvel universe. While she eventually bonded and made amends with the Beast of this dimension, her combination of weather controlling and vampire powers made Bloodstorm one of the more powerful X-Men variants that the regular X-Men have ever had to face. Coming in at number 2, we have one of the most powerful enemies the X-Men have ever seen with Brother Mutant. On Earth 127, a male variant of the Scarlet Witch, known as the Scarlet Warlock, attempted to cast a spell that would transfer Wolverine's adamantium skeleton to Magneto, thus giving Magneto an incredible power boost given his magnetic abilities. However, something with the spell went wrong, and the Scarlet Warlock, Wolverine, Magneto, Quicksilver, and the villain Mesmero were all merged into a singular being known as Brother Mutant. With all 5 of these mutants' powers combined into one villainous figure, Brother Mutant was such a powerful threat that a multiversal team of Wolverines had to be assembled specifically to stop him, just to ensure that all of that power wasn't unleashed on the rest of the Marvel multiverse. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the one and only Magneto from the Ultimate Universe. Unlike a lot of the other entries on this list, this Magneto variant doesn't have any additional powers or physical mutations to make him even more intimidating, but rather is terrifying just because of his sheer willpower. This version of Magneto is much more cynical and dark than the complex figure of the regular Marvel universe, and when he believed his children had been killed by Doctor Doom, Ultimate Magneto was furious enough to begin a global genocide. Switching the polarity of Earth's poles with his magnetic powers and beginning the incredibly controversial event known as Ultimatum, this version of Magneto caused the deaths of millions of people and dozens of beloved superheroes, and was only finally able to be stopped when Cyclops put him out of his misery with a laser blast to the head.